England is one of those places that absolutely ruins you for everywhere else. And I mean that in the best possible way, because once you have walked through a village where the buildings are older than most countries, once you have stood on a cliff top watching the sea crash against chalk walls that have been standing since before recorded history, something shifts inside you. You start to realize that this small island nation somehow packed more beauty, more history, and more character into its borders than places 50 times its size. And today, I'm going to take you on a journey through the wonders of England. Not the England you think you know from movies and television, not just Big Ben and red phone boxes. I am talking about the England that takes your breath away, the hidden corners, the ancient landscapes, the places that make you feel like you have stepped through a crack in time. By the end of this video, you will have a completely different picture of what this country really looks like. So let me start with something that surprises almost everyone who visits England for the first time. The countryside. People come expecting gray skies and rain, and sure, England gets its fair share of drizzle. But what that rain creates is extraordinary. It creates a green so vivid, so impossibly lush, that it almost does not look real. Rolling hills that seem to breathe as the wind moves across them, fields stitched together by ancient hedgerows and meadows scattered with wildflowers that painters have been trying to capture for centuries. The Cotswolds is probably the most famous example of this. Picture honey-colored stone cottages with thatched roofs lining narrow lanes, gardens spilling over with roses and lavender, streams running underneath tiny bridges, villages with names like Bourton on the Water and Castlecombe and Bybury. These are not movie sets, although plenty of movies have been filmed here, because the beauty is so concentrated it almost feels staged. Walking through the Cotswolds on a summer morning, with the mist still hanging low in the valleys and the church bells echoing across the fields, is one of those experiences that fundamentally changes how you see beauty. But here's the thing, the Cotswolds is just the beginning. Move further north and you find the Lake District, which is quite possibly one of the most beautiful places on Earth. I know that is a bold claim. I stand by it. The Lake District is where England flexes every natural muscle it has. Towering mountains reflected perfectly in glass-still lakes. Ancient woodlands where the trees twist into shapes that look like something from a fantasy novel. Waterfalls that tumble down moss-covered rocks into pools so clear you can count the pebbles at the bottom. There is a reason poets like William Wordsworth made this their home. There is a reason Beatrix Potter set her stories here. The Lake District has a magic to it that words genuinely struggle to capture, and unlike a lot of famous natural destinations around the world, it is not overrun with crowds. You can walk for hours along a ridge trail and see nothing but sheep and sky and mile after mile of jaw-dropping scenery: Helvellyn, Scafell Pike, Coniston Water, Windermere, Derwent Water. Every single name on the map delivers something unforgettable. Now let me take you somewhere completely different. The English coastline. This island nation has over 2,000 miles of coast, and it is astonishingly varied. On the south coast, you have the White Cliffs of Dover, those iconic chalk faces that rise dramatically from the English Channel. Standing on top of those cliffs, looking out toward France on a clear day, you feel the weight of history pressing against your back. This is where England has greeted and repelled visitors for millennia. Soldiers, traders, invaders, immigrants, those white walls have seen it all. But the drama does not stop at Dover. Travel west along the coast and you reach the Jurassic Coast in Dorset, a UNESCO World Heritage Site where the cliffs tell the story of 185 million years of Earth's history. The rocks shift from white to orange to deep red as you walk, each color representing a different geological era. Durdle Door, that famous natural limestone arch reaching into turquoise water, is one of those landmarks that stops you in your tracks no matter how many photographs you have seen of it before. The real thing is always more impressive. Keep going west and you reach Cornwall, and Cornwall is something else entirely. Rugged cliffs, hidden coves, fishing villages clinging to steep hillsides, turquoise waters that you genuinely cannot believe are in England. Places like St. Ives with its white sand beaches and artist studios, or Tintagel where the ruins of a castle sit perched on a cliff edge surrounded by legend and sea spray. Cornwall is where King Arthur supposedly held court, and when you stand on those cliffs watching the Atlantic thunder against the rocks below, you understand why people believed in legends here. The landscape demands myth. And speaking of history, let me talk about the thing England does better than almost anywhere else on the planet: preserving it. Well, this country is layered with history like geological strata. Every town, every village, every city has stories embedded in its stones. And unlike many places where ancient history has been paved over or torn down, England has kept extraordinary amounts of it intact and accessible. Start with Stonehenge, obviously. Whatever you think about Stonehenge before you see it, nothing quite prepares you for the real thing. Those massive stones standing in a circle on Salisbury Plain, placed there roughly 5,000 years ago by people we still do not fully understand. The mystery of it is part of the power. How did they move stones weighing 25 tons from Wales over 150 miles away without wheels or metal tools? Why did they arrange them to align with the solstice sun? What ceremonies took place within that circle? We have theories, but the truth is buried in deep time. And standing there, watching the shadows shift across those ancient pillars, you feel genuinely humbled by the depth of human history on this ground. But Stonehenge is just the most famous example. England is dotted with prehistoric monuments, Roman ruins, medieval castles, and Tudor mansions. The Roman baths in the city of Bath give you a window into life 2,000 years ago, when the Romans built an elaborate bathing complex around natural hot springs. You can still see the original lead-lined pool, still filled with steaming water, surrounded by columns and statues and engineering that makes you wonder how a civilization this advanced could ever have fallen. Bath itself deserves its own moment. The city is a masterpiece of Georgian architecture, all pale golden stone crescents and terraces cascading down green hillsides. The Royal Crescent, a sweeping arc of 30 townhouses, is one of the most photographed buildings in England for good reason. The entire city has a harmony to it, a sense of proportion and elegance that makes you want to walk slowly and absorb every detail. Jane Austen lived here and set 2 of her novels here, and the city has barely changed since her time in terms of its essential character. Now from Bath, let me take you to somewhere that embodies a completely different kind of English beauty. York. This northern city is surrounded by medieval walls you can actually walk along, giving you an elevated view of a city that has been continuously inhabited for nearly 2,000 years. At its heart stands York Minster, one of the largest Gothic cathedrals in northern Europe. The scale of it is almost incomprehensible. It took over 250 years to build, and every inch of it reflects the ambition and devotion of the people who created it. The stained glass windows alone, particularly the Great East Window, are among the finest medieval artworks in existence. But York is not just about the Minster. The Shambles, a narrow medieval street with timber frame buildings leaning so close together they nearly touch overhead, is often called the best preserved medieval street in Europe. Walking down it feels like stepping into a different century. And the city's Viking heritage, explored brilliantly in the Jorvik Center, adds yet another layer to a place where history is not something you read about in books. It is something you walk through every single day. Let me shift now to something that catches a lot of visitors off guard. The sheer variety of landscapes within England. This is not a big country. You can drive from the southern coast to the northern border in about 6 hours. But in that relatively short distance, you pass through an astonishing range of terrain. The Peak District, sitting in the heart of the country, offers wild moorlands, dramatic limestone dales, and some of the best hiking in England. Stanage Edge, a gritstone escarpment that stretches for miles, is the kind of place that makes you feel wonderfully small. Below it, valleys dotted with stone villages and crossed by ancient packhorse bridges look like they have not changed in centuries. The Yorkshire Dales further north are equally stunning, but with a character all their own. Wide open valleys flanked by limestone scars, punctuated by waterfalls and crossed by dry stone walls that pattern the landscape like a giant quilt. Malham Cove, a curved cliff of limestone pavement formed by glacial meltwater thousands of years ago, is one of those natural formations that makes you stop and stare and try to wrap your mind around the forces that created it. And then there is Northumberland, the wildest and least populated county in England. Vast empty beaches, dark sky reserves where you can see the Milky Way with the naked eye, and the remains of Hadrian's Wall, built by the Roman Emperor Hadrian nearly 2,000 years ago to mark the northern limit of the Roman Empire. Walking along that wall, with the wind tearing across the crags and not another person in sight, is one of the most evocative experiences England offers. You are literally tracing the boundary of one of the greatest civilizations in human history. Now I have to talk about the cities, because English cities are something special. London gets most of the attention, and deservedly so. It is one of the great cities of the world. But I want to go beyond the tourist highlights for a moment. Yes, the Tower of London is incredible. Yes, Buckingham Palace and Westminster Abbey and the Houses of Parliament are magnificent. But London's real magic is in its neighborhoods. Walk through Hampstead Heath on a Sunday morning and you will find yourself in a landscape that feels more like countryside than city, with views across the entire London skyline from Parliament Hill. Explore the street markets of Portobello Road or Borough Market, and you will taste the multicultural heartbeat of a city that has absorbed influences from every corner of the globe. Sit in one of the ancient pubs in the City of London, where the walls are darkened by centuries of smoke and conversation, and you will feel connected to a tradition of gathering and storytelling that goes back generations beyond count. But beyond London, cities like Oxford and Cambridge offer something no other country can quite match. These university cities, with their ancient colleges built around quiet courtyards, their libraries holding manuscripts that predate the printing press, their traditions that stretch back to the 13th century, represent a concentration of intellectual and architectural heritage that is genuinely staggering. Walking through the Bodleian Library in Oxford or across the Bridge of Sighs in Cambridge, you are walking through spaces where some of the most important ideas in human history were born and debated and refined. Then there is Durham, with its cathedral and castle perched on a rocky peninsula above a river bend, a sight so dramatic it looks like it was designed by a movie director rather than medieval monks. There is Bristol, vibrant and colorful, with Brunel's suspension bridge spanning a gorge that would be impressive even without a Victorian engineering masterpiece draped across it. There is Liverpool, with its waterfront architecture and musical heritage, and the kind of warmth and humor in its people that makes you feel welcome from the very first conversation. Let me circle back to something I mentioned earlier, because I think it deserves more attention. The English Garden. Now, I know that might sound like a minor thing compared to castles and coastlines, but hear me out. The English Garden is one of the country's great art forms, and it is everywhere. From the grand landscapes of Capability Brown at places like Blenheim Palace and Chatsworth House to the cottage gardens bursting with color in tiny villages, England has elevated gardening to something that borders on the spiritual. The gardens at Sissinghurst in Kent, created by Vita Sackville West, are a masterclass in using plants to create rooms of color and texture and mood. The gardens at Great Dixter in Sussex, championed by Christopher Lloyd, showed that gardens could be wild and exuberant and rule-breaking while still being beautiful. And the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew in London contain one of the largest collections of living plants on Earth, housed in glass houses that are architectural wonders in their own right. There is something about the English relationship with gardens that reflects something deep in the national character. This idea that beauty is worth cultivating, that patience and care and attention to detail can transform even a small patch of ground into something extraordinary. When you walk through an English garden in full bloom with bees humming through the lavender and butterflies drifting between the foxgloves, you understand that this is not just horticulture. This is an expression of a culture that believes in making things beautiful. Now I want to take you somewhere unexpected. The English countryside at night. Because England has some of the darkest skies in Europe, particularly in the north. Northumberland International Dark Sky Park is one of the largest areas of protected dark sky in Europe, and on a clear night, the view is life-changing. The Milky Way stretches from horizon to horizon, stars upon stars upon stars, more than you believed possible. In a world increasingly flooded with artificial light, these dark skies are a treasure beyond measure. But even outside the designated dark sky areas, the English countryside at night has a quality to it that is profoundly peaceful. Owls calling across moonlit fields, the distant sound of a river, the silhouette of a church spire against a star-filled sky. These are the moments that do not make it onto postcards, but that stay with you long after the trip is over. Let me talk about something else that makes England special as a travel destination. Accessibility. Unlike many countries where the greatest wonders require days of travel to reach, England puts its treasures remarkably close together. You can visit Stonehenge in the morning, explore Bath in the afternoon, and be in the Cotswolds for dinner. You can take a train from London to York in under 2 hours, from York to the Lake District in another 90 minutes. The country's size, which might seem like a limitation, is actually one of its greatest strengths as a travel destination. Everything is within reach. And the infrastructure for exploring is superb. Thousands of miles of public footpaths crisscross the country, many of them ancient routes that have been walked for centuries. The right to roam across open land means that the landscape is genuinely open to everyone. National Trust properties, English heritage sites, and countless local museums and galleries make the country's history and culture accessible in a way that few nations manage. The food scene also deserves mention, because England has undergone a quiet revolution in the last 2 decades. Gone are the days when English food was a punchline. Today, The country has some of the best restaurants in the world, from Michelin-starred dining rooms to street food markets to gastropubs serving elevated versions of classic dishes. A proper Sunday roast in a country pub with perfectly roasted meat and Yorkshire puddings and all the trimmings is one of life's great pleasures. Fresh fish and chips eaten on a harbor wall with seagulls circling overhead is another. And the cream teas, scones with clotted cream and jam served with a pot of tea are worth the trip alone. I want to finish by talking about something intangible but absolutely essential to understanding what makes England wonderful. It is the atmosphere, the feeling you get when you are there. England has a particular quality of light, especially in the late afternoon when the sun sits low and everything turns golden. The English light has a softness to it, a warmth that makes landscapes glow, and buildings seem to radiate from within. Turner painted it, Constable painted it, every landscape photographer who visits falls in love with it. And then there is the sound of England. Church bells on a Sunday morning, rain on a pub window, birdsong in a country lane at dawn, the crunch of gravel under your feet as you walk up the drive to a stately home. These sounds form a soundtrack that is unmistakably English, and they contribute to an atmosphere that is at once peaceful and deeply stimulating. There is also the people. The English reputation for reserve hides a warmth and a wit that reveals itself the moment you step into a local pub or strike up a conversation at a bus stop. The humor is dry and self-deprecating. The hospitality is genuine even when it is understated. And the pride in local places, local traditions, and local history is palpable everywhere you go. Ask someone in the Lake District about their favorite walk, and you will get a 30-minute conversation filled with passion and detail. Ask someone in Cornwall about the best beach and prepare for a spirited debate.